on an all-new Dr. Phil. A televangelist scandal.
You had an affair, correct?
The unanswered questions.
Are you sorry for what took place, or are you sorry you got caught?
Why did he risk losing his wife?
There were days that I screamed and I cried.
Did you blame yourself for this at all?
And his ministry.
Do you feel like you betrayed your followers?
God betrayed everybody.
But you knew that would be the effect when you did it. This is going to be a changing day in your life.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
It matters to you. That's what I want to talk about. Are we ready in the booth? Let's do it.
Prominent televangelist who claims today that he is the victim of a multi-million-dollar extortion scheme.
We are here today to celebrate the goodness and the grace of God.
Marcus Lamb, who has co-founded the Dallas-based global Christian network Daystar Television, says that 3 people wanted cash to keep quiet about an affair that he had with a woman several years ago.
When we were threatened and this $7.5 million demand was made, we didn't consider for 1 second to pay it.
With that threat, we knew we're going to go ahead and share our story.
Well, it was just last week that Marcus and Joni Lamb, founders of Daystar, the fastest growing Christian network in the world, went public about an affair that Marcus had several years ago. Now, first, let me say hello to you guys. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm sorry for the circumstance. And I probably should say, for the viewers, just so they know, we know each other. I certainly consider y'all friends, and Robin and I have both been on Marcus and Joni's Daystar Network a few times. Take a look, and then we'll talk.
You had no idea that this door of opportunity would open up, say, what, 10 years ago?
No, I had no intention of, being on television. I truly believe that everything I've done in my life up until now has prepared me for this moment in time.
America is screaming for role models of established marriages for men and women who truly love each other. And so, I think that's why you get the response that you do from people. They love seeing that.
I always find it odd that some people will say to me in such shock that I'm there every day, you go to every show, and I always think to myself, why is that so odd? I wonder what kind of relationship maybe they have that they find it odd I would support my husband, because that's what I'm doing every day. I'm there to support my husband.
Y'all have a terrific show, you have a terrific ministry and Christian network, and now all of this has happened. Now I understand that at the end of November, you were the target of a demand. You had an affair in the past, correct?
Yes, sir. These 3 individuals came forth and said, if you don't pay us $7.5 million, then we're going to take our information to the media.
Mm-hmm. So this alleged attempt was to extract millions of dollars from y'all under the risk of bringing you down. And Joni, you were very strong about saying, not going to do it. We're going to go out. We're going to talk about this and just put it out there for everybody to see and hear.
Yes. On the day that I found out, I came home. He was flying in from a trip, and I had been one of those people that always said, if my husband cheated on me, that I would divorce him. I was one of those hardliners. And I just remember, that we're people of faith, obviously. And so the only thing I knew to do at that point was to pray, and that's what I did. And when I did, I really sensed in my heart that God was saying to me, he's worth fighting for, and your marriage is worth fighting for. And so...
And Dr. Phil, when Joni approached me with this information, I was in such despair. I thought, I've lost my marriage. I'm going to lose our children. I'm going to lose the ministry that God had entrusted me with that was so dear. But when she said those words that the Lord had spoken to her and said, Marcus is worth fighting for, it was a glimmer of hope in my heart. And that's when I said, Joni, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right and to heal the hurt.
Now, I had that calm and peace for that moment, Dr. Phil, but later I did not have the calm.
You got hot about this, right?
Yes. And rightfully so.
Oh, yes.
You got plenty mad.
Oh, I did, because immediately the day after we went and called Fred and Anna Kendall, who are counselors who we knew that had helped so many marriages. But it was a very hard and difficult process that we went through for about 9 months to a year. But we wanted to do that privately. And one of the things that Fred...
Well, our counselors had advised us to do that.
Yeah.
They said it would be very difficult to heal if we brought that to the public's attention at that time.
Well, let's talk about this. I mean, because there are two different points that we have to discuss here. One is you're in the public eye, not just as celebrities, but as people of faith that are ministers that are leading people. And so folks can feel a sense of betrayal that, you know, here you've been up talking all of this high-minded, faith-based rhetoric, and in fact, you're sneaking around having an affair. You know, that's one level that you have to think about. And then the other is what happens between the two of you. Do you feel like you betrayed your followers?
Well, I feel like I betrayed everybody. I betrayed the Lord. I betrayed Joni, my family, our followers, and I'm so sorry for that.
But I've known you a long time, and you knew that would be the effect when you did it. What did you say in your head that made it okay in the moment?
Well, it was, you know, a long process, and it was just a gradual thing, and finally you just get to a point to where you get into deception, and you make a choice that you don't realize the ramifications of it at the moment.
Well, I think it's important. One of the things we learned in counseling is that, I mean, early on it was an emotional relationship. I mean, there was no sex involved for years. It was just an emotional relationship where there were phone calls, there were emails, that kind of thing. And you know, as we worked through this process, I think that was one of the things that, you know, became apparent for both of us, is that accountability is so important in marriage. So, you know, we have access to each other's computers and phones and, you know, all of the Facebook and all of the social networking that we have available today that are destroying a lot of marriages. You know, that's why we, you know, we have that accountability with one another. But I think that that was an important part of it, to understand that, you know, he's someone who would say, I never thought I would be caught in that trap. That's right. In a million years. I mean, he was someone that would say that. We've helped, I mean, hundreds of couples over the years. But I think it was that emotional tie that started it, and then eventually became sin.
How'd you find out?
There was an individual that cared about me and cared about him, that had some information where they believed that this could be going on, and they came to me and shared the information with me, and I confronted him the same day.
And you knew this woman?
Yes.
Because you said you had recognized something wasn't right early on. But what did you, because women want to know, what did you say to yourself
well,
about
when
that?
we were at home and stuff, there would be times when there would be phone calls, or he'd be in his office, or he'd be on his computer, and he seemed to be very protective of his computer. And so, but I had no idea that it was anything beyond something emotional, but we began to argue about that near the end, right before I found out.
So when you did find out, it was like, aha, all
Yes.
that fell into place.
It did. It was still shocking for me, though, to deal with.
Why did y'all want to be here today?
One reason, and it is why we do what we do every day, and that is to encourage people that you can make it through even something what we've gone through, and that marriage is worth fighting for, and that marriage is not just a commitment between a husband and a wife, but it's a commitment between a husband and a wife and God. And it's, for us, people of faith, it's covenant. And also to, you know, I'll just say this, from the time that we went through this, and even went through the years of our process of healing and restoration, I did so many shows on this because I became passionate about helping people. And I'd always wanted to help people, but I became passionate about marriage. And so, you know, some of the issues that we dealt with was pornography and adultery, and, you know, all of the things that that people are going through today. And I think the church, for so long, you know, we just want to pretend like these things don't go on in the church, but they do. And I think it's, you know, it's time for us to speak up and speak to it and talk about it and try to help people.
Why did you never come forward with this before this alleged extortion attempt?
Well, Joni and I wanted to have plenty of time to heal. We wanted to have a track record of living right and doing right. Plus, our children were young, and we wanted to spare them the pain of this until they could at least be old enough to be able to handle it better.
Would you have eventually talked about this?
Yeah, we talked about that. We wanted to share our story. And I don't know when exactly that would have been, at the, you know, 5-year mark, but we've always shared everything with our audience. So that was something that I knew that we would do. And you can see things that we've said and done, over these last several years, where now if you knew our story, you look back and you go, oh, that's what she's talking about. Because I would talk about it, but I wouldn't talk about it. And so it was definitely a part of everything that we did, and it definitely impacted us in such a powerful way that we wanted to help others through it.
And Dr. Phil, you asked why would we come on your show? So many other shows have invited us, but most of them, it's a sensational angle. But we know how loving and redemptive you are to help people, and we felt safe to come and share. My heart is, if I have to be humiliated to help prevent somebody else from getting in a situation like this, or if they're in a trap right now, that maybe this will give them hope and they'll get out of that trap and they can be healed, then that's why we're here to share today.
So you want to use this to help other people.
Yes,
and
sir.
toward that end, I've got some hard questions for you, and I got a problem with a couple of things you've had to say, and I'm going to tell you what that is right after the break.
Okay, here we go.
Tomorrow on an all-new Dr. Phil. Overweight teens harassed at home.
You had a tuna sandwich, french fries, fried chicken. I intended to make her aware.
You couldn't be more destructive to her efforts to lose weight if you had been hired to undermine her.
Now they're fighting back.
Jennifer would like to go to one of these fat camps.
My dad will say, oh, we don't have money.
That was a lie, wasn't it?
I didn't trust that she would follow through.
The truth was you didn't believe in her.
That's tomorrow.
Marcus Lamb, the head of Daystar Television Network, told viewers that 3 people tried to extort millions from him to keep his affair private. During the broadcast, Lamb apologized for the affair and had a message to viewers.
I'm so sorry. I've asked God to forgive me years ago. I asked my precious Joni, I said, honey, I'll do whatever it takes to heal the hurt and right the wrong. I take 100% responsibility. Joni has no blame. The other person doesn't have any blame. It's all, I don't even blame the devil. It's all on me.
Well, Marcus had this affair several years ago, and when Joni confronted him, they reached out to Fred and Anna Kendall, who have been counseling couples on marriage for over 30 years.
When we first met with Joni and Marcus, I said, Joni, do you want to make this marriage work? And she said, absolutely. Then we turned to Marcus. Now, what I was looking for in Marcus, would he be transparent?
He opened up immediately. He was totally transparent and was, like you said, taking 100% responsibility.
I've dealt with men in ministry and men in leadership and other positions who got into situations like that. And most of the time, I'm sad to say, most of them are not very transparent and they're very protective of their image. I really bared in on Marcus because Marcus was the key. And if he's not going to stand, he needs to fall.
Well, if you're just joining us, I'm here with Joni and Marcus Lamb, and I've said up front that these are folks that I consider friends of mine. I've known y'all for a number of years now, and you guys all know I consider myself very much a Christian. There are televangelists on television that I think are why we have remote controls. We can just keep on moving. And then there are those that I think are real and come from the heart, and that includes Joni and Marcus. I'm a great fan of theirs, as is Robin. But sometimes we get to thinking that because someone is a minister, someone is leading a congregation, that they're above the problems of the world. And that's just simply not true. And we're here talking about the fact that Marcus has had an affair. When this happened, they reached out for help to Fred and Anna Kendall here. You guys you've counseled thousands, actually, of couples.
Yes. Fred has probably counseled over 10,000.
Yeah,
but
a lot.
that's because he's really old and he's been around a long time.
So, did these guys get real when they came in and sat down with y'all?
Yes. Well, the first thing I wanted to find out right away was, were they willing to work at it, one or both of them? Because we believe a marriage can be saved if just one of the parties wants to work at it. It's possible to save a marriage. And if both want to, it's almost a home run if both will be then. They'll work at it and then be accountable.
Right.
And I wanted to find out if Marcus was going to be transparent and he was going to be repentant. I mean, sorry for the whole thing. Then I wanted to find out if Joni could forgive him, because unforgiveness creates a root of bitterness. They just get bitter, and it doesn't get better.
Okay, and the question a lot of people are going to ask is, are you sorry for what took place, or are you sorry you got caught? I mean, because those are two very different questions, and a lot of people are going to have that question in their mind. How do you answer that question?
Well, I'm sorry it took place. It was the worst decision of my life.
Here's the thing. You all say that you want to help folks here, and I know that to be true because I know y'all. And I can tell you the best way you can do that is to be real about it.
Yes, sir.
Because I was so glad, Joni, to hear you say, you bet I got mad. At first I had this moment of calm and peace, but then I got plenty hot. I was mad. I was really upset. Because, I mean, if women are out there watching this and watching you, I would hate for them to say, well, you know, that's just not real. You just don't sit down and have a moment of prayer and meditation and everything is okay. Because then they're going to say, well, I must not be a Christian. I must not have faith. Because that ain't the way I feel. I wanted to set his hair on fire when he was in bed, you know. And so I'm glad to hear you be real about your emotions about that.
Well, you know, and one of the things we do is me and the Daystar singers and our band will go minister inside the prisons. And we recorded one of our CDs, in fact, worship CDs, inside one of the largest women's prison in America. But I kiddingly told him that if the Lord hadn't given me that calm for that day, I would now have a prison ministry inside, you know, because I would have joined the ranks. But yeah, I mean, after that, I was so, I mean, I went through all of those stages that you know about. I mean, I was first shocked, and then, you know, I was hurt, and then I was angry. And Fred kids with me still today that I lived in Camelot, and I found out Camelot really doesn't exist. But I lived there for a while, you know, thinking our world was perfect. But it's not, Dr. Phil. And, you know, there are so many men and women that are hurting, and, you know, I can relate to some of that, because I mean, there were days that I screamed and I cried. I think I might have thrown some things. I mean, when he and I were alone, and, you know, screamed, "How could you do this, you idiot?" You know, I mean, I did all of that.
And I was an idiot.
And he had to, I think the hardest thing for him was to watch me go through that.
Yes.
One of the things that I truly believe is if you ever get past this, and you say you want to get to where you feel strong, you feel restored, you're never going to do that if you do several things. And I think you're doing some of them. And that can create obstacles. Number one, if you ever try to trivialize this, then you'll never get past this. Because trust me, she doesn't trivialize this in any way. This is a full-on problem, right? And I looked at some of the things you said. You said, well, it started out as a dependency. Then it became a mutual affirmation, then an emotional involvement, then minimal sexual contact. That's like being minimally pregnant. You know, you either are or you aren't. And I would hate for you to try to minimalize that or trivialize that, because that would be an affront to you if that happened. And I think that's important. And you feel like he has acknowledged this fully, Fred?
I really do. I think it's easy in discussion to kind of go around along the line, because that's how it progresses. But that's how anything negative usually progresses. Most of us don't start off, we wake up one day and say we're going to go out and commit adultery or shoot somebody. It begins as a buildup.
Do you think at times a part of you tries to trivialize this?
Dr. Phil, I can't say anything good about myself, but I don't feel like I have. I was just trying to explain how the process started, because I think if people can see where those first steps are, then it can be a warning sign to them. Hey, when you start seeing these kind of things happen, you better stop right there and re-examine yourself.
Yeah, because you said on the tape, you said, you know, I don't even blame the devil for this. This was my choice, my free will, I assume your choice. But yet you told us when you were talking about it, it was a sneaky way the devil did this. It's a sneaky way the devil did this. You know, the devil made me do it.
Well, no, this is not a Flip Wilson, the devil made me do it moment. The devil does influence, but we have free will. I made the choice. I was wrong. It's my fault, and I'm so sorry I did.
Yeah, and I think that, I guess what I'm saying is you don't want to model any deflection on this, because at one point you said at least it was with a Christian woman and not some transvestite.
I didn't say
I'm the one that made that statement.
Was that your statement?
I made that statement because
one of y'all said that. And
let me tell you why I said it.
What in the world? What did I miss here?
Let me make sure the audience here and there and wherever understands why I said that. So often, people begin to have vain imaginations and they connect it back to other people. And I've worked with some other ministry people who have had involvement with men, and they were men themselves, or they had involvement with women from the straight or for strippers or massage parlors or from, you know, just hookers.
Transvestites.
Or transvestites. And then they really felt exploited, poor guy. But let me tell you, I don't want anybody out there to think that this was anything other than him and one woman who was a Christian woman, we hope, and we hope he was a Christian at the time, and I believe he was. And I want you to know this, I've dealt with some pretty tough people in my life. We do a lot of work for law enforcement, and I spent 11.5 years in the Marine Corps, and I was a probation officer in California, and California has some bad people, not many. And so
Ease up on California here.
Well, I said not many.
All right, go ahead.
And I want you to know, I believe I know the difference between being embarrassed, ashamed, sorry that I got caught, sorry that I'm hurting other people. Gee, I'm going to tell you, I really sincerely believe and began to believe after about the 4th session. Now, I didn't start there, but about the 4th or 5th session, I told Dan, I said, I think he's genuinely sorry. I think he is ill almost over grieving God, most of all, then over damaging his wife and over the fact that this could ruin them. And, you know, we went through some steps, and the last step that we went through was, next to the last was, first of all, keep it private as long as you can, because when people are sick, they need to be in intensive care.
Give themselves some time to heal.
Give themselves
Not
some
in
time
public.
to heal. And we set up an accountability that included her mom and dad and some other people.
Including us.
And then I said, be prepared. Somebody's going to want to exploit it one day. Be hyper vigilant. Somebody will try to exploit it. And when they do, go public. That's the time to go public. But don't rush it. Get well.
Next, a question for Marcus I want him to answer with 100% honesty.
Joni and I had such a wonderful marriage for so many years.
And next to me is my sweetheart.
I just assumed that I would never do anything in an improper way. I always thought that would never happen to me.
People ask me all the time, Dr. Phil, can relationships survive infidelity? And my answer is always, of course they can, yes. But as Fred and Anna say, it takes two people. It takes you being willing to forgive and not make it a life sentence, and it makes you owning it and realizing that until she knows, and forget about being ministers for a minute, I'm just talking to just you two, you this couple. Unless she knows that you get it, that you get what this did to her, not as a minister, but as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, unless and until she knows you get it, she will never, ever be able to turn this loose.
Yes.
Unless she knows you get what this did, what message it sends to her, what questions it causes her to ask herself as a woman and a wife. And I sense that you do get that.
Thank you.
Do you?
Yes, sir, I believe I do.
Do you know what this did to her?
Yes, sir, I do.
You know, I think that me having to watch, you know, and be in the counseling sessions with, because Fred, as you can see, former Marine, is not going to be easy on him. But, you know, watching that process, I mean, he was genuinely repentant, and I watched, you know, him watch me, and I know that was the most devastating thing for him of all, to watch me go through what I went through. And, you know, Dr. Phil, if he had been an abusive or, you know, husband, or been mean, or, you know, not supportive, or, you know, we've been married 28 years, that 20 plus years that he had been a wonderful husband and has been a wonderful father, you know, I don't know that I could have fought for him to the degree that I did had I didn't have all of that history. So we had a lot of history.
Did you blame yourself for this at all?
Well, I mean, initially, don't you think all women do? They're like, what in the world? I mean, we're supposed to have this great marriage. But one of the things I found out in counseling is not that I take any of the responsibility away from him, because he owns 100% of the responsibility, and that's something that Fred and Anna made clear at the beginning. But what I did find out is about myself, and this was why I was writing my book. All this happened, by the way. You may not want to write a book on surrender. So as I'm writing my book, I changed some things in the marriage chapter, and I talked about, you know, how that we had rededicated ourselves again to one another. But I got really busy working for the Lord. I was doing my own show. I was co-hosting a show with him. I helped, you know, lead a band and worship singers, and we travel, and our kids were teenagers. I was really busy, and we had always been so connected, but somewhere along the way, we got disconnected.
Okay, but that is a marriage issue. That's not an infidelity issue. And there are two different things here. And because I wrote down something you said, and I quote,
okay,
we weren't really having problems in our marriage, but, and but's a big word for me. That means forget everything I just said. Now I'm going to tell you what I really mean.
Okay.
You said we weren't really having problems in our marriage, but I was so busy working and raising kids that when Marcus came home, I really didn't have a lot left to give. That makes me think that you're saying that you own part of this, that if you had been a better wife, if you had had more to give, if you had been more attentive or affectionate or engaging, that perhaps this wouldn't have happened. Because that's what you said.
Yeah.
But that's not true, right?
I think he has to take 100% responsibility.
Yes.
But, uh-oh, there it is again. However, made that better than but?
No, that's just but version 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just put a period there and start a new sentence.
Okay, a new sentence is, I think a marriage is two people, you know, giving 100%, and it's something you have to work at. And those are some areas, although they're not related to his infidelity, those are some areas that I needed to improve in, and I think have made a difference.
No question in my mind
Okay.
that,
Is that better?
It's a little better. Because you put in although. You've been but, however, and although. And I read those pretty much the same.
Okay.
Read those pretty much the same. And my point is, and I want all women to hear this. This reason I'm picking on you with this.
Okay.
Is there are marriage issues. Could you have been a better wife? I'm sure.
Yeah.
Could you have been a better husband? I'm sure. Those are things that you negotiate within a marriage.
Right.
But once somebody turns away from their partner, once somebody turns outside the marriage and involves an interloper, now you're on a whole different ball game. That doesn't have anything to do with how tired you are when you get home from work. That has to do with you making a very immature decision, a very hedonistic decision to do something that feels good at the time, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever you might do to distort it. But that has nothing to do with this. And then you went on to say, Marcus and I both came to the table and said we were going to work through this and ask the Lord to restore where we got off the track.
Where he got
I
off the track.
assume you weren't with him when he did this.
That was a typo.
Yeah, that's a typo. Okay, they hit the W. So I'm picking on you here, but this is, and I want you to pay this forward.
Okay.
Because there wasn't any we got off the track. Now, we might have done some things to make the marriage better. We might have communicated better. We might have done some things, but he went across the street.
Yes. Amen.
Yes.
Okay, that's...
I agree with you fully. And we
Can I get an amen here?
Amen.
You got it.
All right. Coming up, what happened when Marcus and Joni told their children about his affair?
Several years ago, Marcus and I went through a challenge in our marriage.
I thought that my marriage was now over, that I would lose our children.
There were days that I screamed and I cried, and on the other side of this pain, we are better individuals than we were before.
I'm so glad that you did come here to talk about this, because number one, you're being honest, and this is part of the truth, and you're not holding yourselves up to be above everyone else. And, you know, ministers serve. They serve.
They do.
And you know, that's, you don't have to be above. You serve, and y'all are so good at doing that. And secondly, I want people to see that time having passed since this happened, that couples do heal.
Yes.
They do survive. They do keep their families together. They do continue to lead their children. I read 2 emails from your daughters that were as eloquent as anything I've ever seen. I mean, saying, we know who you are, and as you go forth and talk about this, just know that the people that matter know who you are.
Yes, that's true.
And your daughters stepped up and said, Dad, go hold your head up, because we know who you are and you came through this, and we're proud of you as mom and dad. And I mean, that's everything, right?
Yes, sir.
So it's darkest before the light, and it is a story of inspiration and victory here, because you two have done the work with these able counselors here that put this thing back on track. Next, why this counseling couple almost called it quits.
Dr. Phil, there is something so powerful about having come through something like this that gives you so much faith and hope for other people. Fred and I had a horrible marriage some years back. We've been married 45 years now, but we had one of the worst marriages that we've ever seen. But because it is healed and forgiven, and we're strong.
You wanted to divorce him, right?
Oh yes, yes. I filed for divorce. He was a jerk, and I was medicating it with outside relationships and a lot of alcohol.
Ask her about the day they came back from the honeymoon.
Tell us about the day you came back from the honeymoon.
Okay, he just got off active duty in the Marine Corps, which he ended up having 11 and a half years in there. So if that gives you any idea. And I started realizing that he thought that I was his recruit and his job was to shake me up. So the morning after our honeymoon, he wakes me up and says, "Sweetheart, wake up, here's your schedule." And I look at it and it says 0500 coffee and rolls, and I looked over. Yeah, I looked over and something's percolating there, and then it said 0515 sex. Then I think it was
You gotta schedule the important things.
and it was probably 0520. No, a little bit longer than that, but 0. Oh no. Okay, it was probably 0545 calisthenics, and then we were going to get up and go downstairs and have breakfast. And I looked at him, and I looked at that list, and I said, "You have got to be kidding." And I threw it across the room, went back to sleep, and that was his first clue that we might have some differences.
Yeah.
And then it got to the place where I called him. I said, "You think you're the commander-in-chief of the universe?" And he did. And he was very controlling and dominant and difficult, and the more I pulled away and started doing things he didn't approve of, the stronger he got in that dominance and control, to the place that I started medicating and filed for divorce.
Yeah, and I assume that got your attention.
Well, one of the best things that ever happened to me, I've had many good things happen, and all of them usually were bad. And one of them was her drinking, running around. I didn't like any of her boyfriends.
I thought he was narrow-minded.
2 of them I encouraged.
While you were married?
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of boyfriends?
Several, yeah.
2 of them went to the emergency room for just a visit or so. But one of the things that happened is I came to the realization that I needed to be somebody besides who I was. It's kind of like an AA wake-up. I needed a higher power than just me or just the Marine Corps. So I came to the realization that if I wanted this girl to love me, I had to become her servant and her hero. So I decided I'd identify the enemy, and it wasn't her. Because, you know, in Vietnam, we got confused who was the enemy. We became neurotic and psychotic. So I decided she wasn't the enemy. I decided that I needed allies, and then I decided I need to give her grace.
And y'all were able to forgive each other. Have you been able to forgive Marcus for this?
Yes.
I mean, fully and completely?
Completely and totally.
Dr. Phil, many months into it, I said, "How much do you trust me?" And what did you say?
Well, I mean, starting off, it was lower, you know, like after we had been to several months of counseling, it was, you know, what, 30, 40%. And then every day after, not every day, but weekly, he would say, "What percentage do you trust me now?" And so I said, now this many years later, it's 99.9. So I'm just holding out a sliver there.
Well, that's
wisdom.
Yeah, that's wisdom. We'll talk about that when we come back. Joni and Marcus Lamb head Daystar. It's the fastest growing Christian network in the world today, and for good reason. Because they talk about real things with real people and bring a message of faith and hope and healing. And they're not above the challenges of life. Marcus had an affair, and that all has come out just in recent times. Fred and Anna Kendall here have counseled them across time because, as I've always said, marriages can survive infidelity. Is this marriage going to survive?
We're going to survive. I mean, he tells me every day that since I've forgiven him, I'm stuck with him for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So.
Now, at the time that some of this took place, you stepped down as far as actual...
From preaching.
From preaching. Is that still the case?
No, sir. I am back preaching. However, I am submitting to the denomination that has ordained me, and so that will mean that I will step down for at least a year from preaching, and then a second year I will be on probation. And that's just part of the consequences of sin.
Because they're just now finding out about it. Because, again, Fred and Anna felt like it was important that we have that private time to heal. I think that was really important for us, that we have that time. And so we don't feel that, you know, and he doesn't feel like just because he's the head of a network, that he, you know, should not submit to the denomination that we both grew up in.
But during that time, you will be missed.
Thank you.
I can tell you will be missed. Final question. How do you feel about these people that you say have tried to extort millions of dollars from you?
Well, you know,
where do you put them in your mind and heart?
You know, that's something we'll have to work through, because we know all of the people, and one of them in particular, without telling a lot of detail, she knew about our challenge years ago and the crisis, but she also knew that I chose to forgive Marcus and work on saving our marriage. So, you know, to put those two together and to think that she would come back years later, you know, and say, by the way, I know a secret about Marcus Lamb, and I'm going to go to the media if you don't pay us $7.5 million. I mean, how do you wrap your brain around something like that? And, you know, I'm just glad that we can share our story. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to tell our story. You know, let the chips fall where they may, because you're always going to have people who love you and people who hate you and people who judge you and people who don't. But I mean, all you can do is tell the truth and then take your pain and use it to try to help someone else, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, I commend you all for coming here. I commend you for being so open and honest about this, and for providing a real-world circumstance of overcoming this challenge and keeping this marriage and this family together. And thank you all for the help that you've given them as well. We'll be right back. Well, I want to thank Marcus and Joni Lamb of Daystar Television Network and their marriage advisors, Anna and Fred Kendall. Now, they are actually from the Life Languages Institute, which is a terrific, terrific organization. I'm going to put a link up on our website so you can find their organization, because they have an awful lot to offer. And Joni did not ask me to do this, but nonetheless, I'm going to. Everybody in the audience is going home with a copy of Joni's book, Surrender All. Now, Robin and I have read this book. I highly, highly recommend this, and it's a wonderful time to be reading this. It is a very uplifting and inspiring book. You did a great job on this, Joni, so thank you for doing that. All of y'all are going to go home with a copy of it. Those of you at home can find it and should, because I highly recommend it. For more information on today's show, go to drphil.com, or you can reach me on Facebook, or you can tweet me on Twitter. I'm all over the place. Thanks for being here. So long.